All right, we are recording. Let's make a face. Danny, your reaction to Taylor Jenkins being fired with a winning record. Oh, John was surprised by that. Okay, let's see how hard it was to do this year's rankings. All right, so it seems like this will be interesting here. We'll see if that means that we're not going to have much disagreement. All right, let's get rolling here and do a podcast. Welcome on, everyone, to one of our signature episodes here on Dunc'd On and Dunc'd On Prime and Hollinger and Duncan. It is a simulcast here. Joining me right now, Danny Leroux, John Hollinger, to talk about the top 10 players in the NBA. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. Do we need to look left and right like at the beginning of the Brady Bunch?
I can't. I mirror my screen, so I'm not sure who I'm looking. Okay, all right.
I'm really happy I guessed correctly the first time. So.
Yeah, you guys could look really dumb. I'm in the middle, so I'm at least I can just do it.
Hey,
okay.
Nate.
Yeah.
Is this me talking to Danny? Does it go around the horn or yeah?
So remind everyone. I will remind everyone quickly the way that we do this. Of course, Danny and I have been doing our position rankings leading up to this, but the construct is we are starting a season right now, followed by a playoffs, and then we also are accounting for injuries, but not in the sense that people are injured right now. We're accounting for, say, someone like Kyrie Irving. We're making him healthy. He has rehabbed his ACL, but he's starting a season coming off of that ACL. So you will price in maybe a performance reduction, not being able to play back-to-backs, that kind of stuff. But we're not going to say that he's just injured right now and can't contribute. We're trying to fast forward in time, at least for those players, to get a sense of where they fall in the league. Anything else you guys want to say before we get started here? Some general thoughts on this exercise or anything like that?
Well, something I like to think about is it's kind of the player on a randomized team. So how much you can fit in different circumstances or how much you don't fit in different circumstances is something I care about a lot. And then how good are you at the most important things in the NBA, generating good shots, and how bad are your weaknesses? Those are some big things.
And then I think the other thing is we tend to think in terms of the highest level games, the biggest outcomes. So can you take a 20-win team and make it a 40-win team? That's nice. Can you deliver in a conference finals type environment? I think that is the bigger question. And so that's how a lot of these guys are being judged.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And we're talking about just how are you going to make your team win basketball games? We're not about any of the narratives. The stats that we're going to look at are all going to be focused on that, not necessarily individual stats. So am I correct that there were only 2 players in consideration for each of y'all's top spot, or was there only 1 player in consideration?
I actually had a 10-way tie at number 1.
Well, here goes
one for each day you were on vacation.
It was a 10-way tie between Reese Beekman, Malcolm Brogdon, Ryan Dunn, Anthony Gill, Sam Hauser, Jay Huff, DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome, Braxton Key, and Trey Murphy.
I mean, Trey Murphy is clearly number 1 out of that group. That's I'm just impressed you're able to randomly generate 10 names that are in the NBA. I don't know if I could do that.
Is there anything these 10 players have in common?
I mean, John, some of them are double Cavaliers and some of them are single Cavaliers.
So that's true. That's true. That's true. DeAndre Hunter and Ty Jerome are double Cavaliers, and their record together as Cavaliers is monstrous.
Okay, so let me try reframing this since the freeform
sorry,
didn't seem to go too well.
I completely hijacked the show.
Okay. Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Was it a tough call between those two guys for y'all at number one, or did you have a clear number one among those two? Danny, I'll start with you.
It was a tough call, but it wasn't the toughest call. I still have, as this construct, you know, Nate and I are going to do awards soon enough. I think that this is closer for MVP than it is for top players. And part of the reason for my purposes is just that Jokic has a larger track record. He has been the best player on a championship team recently, not last year now, but recently. And as great as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was, remember, I had him significantly lower than this last year. He has earned his way into the top two for me. I'm still more confident that Jokic can generate high-level offense at the best levels, and the difference between them on offense is enough for me to be comfortable with Jokic's defensive deficiencies. So I have them in separate tiers, but barely.
John?
I had them in the same tier. I did go with Joker. I was surprised when I got in the data how close it seemed. However, I do agree with Danny. Like, the MVP argument is different. It's a regular season only award, and it's an award for this season only. When you look at Jokic's proven ability to deliver in the postseason, where I think SGA, he had a really good series against Dallas last year, but I still think we need to see that element of him to vault him to the number one spot. I would say he might very well be number one when we do this next year. And there are reasons to put him at number one now. For instance, I mean, SGA is part of an all-time great defense. I don't think Nikola Jokic could be part of an all-time great defense. Like, I don't really think that's possible. So that's an item in SGA's favor, I would say. But overall, body of work, I still got to go with Joker.
John, you said some of the stats you looked at were closer than you thought. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, when I looked at some of the nerdiest, Darko, EPM, LeBron type of stats that are both try to be predictive, but also look back at the players' on-court, off-court impact, adjusting for who else was on the floor with him and whatnot. I thought Jokic would have a commanding lead, and he really didn't. So yeah. That was a little different than my expectation. I tracked those during the year, but not like obsessively. So that surprised me a little.
Yeah, I too went with Jokic at number one. I did have Shai in the same tier. When I think of a tier, it's, hey, I think there's a reasonable argument that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is as good or better than Nikola Jokic because of Jokic's incredible track record and having done it in the playoffs for a very long time. I would still have Jokic above Shai, but I'm not sure that Nikola Jokic is better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm not sure of that at all at this point. And they're such different players. I think Jokic is a better offensive player. Shai is certainly a better defensive player for his position and allows you, as you alluded to, John, to kind of build a better defense overall. And I think we'll see whether teams are able to do a little bit better against Jokic than they have in the past by denying him the ball, stuff like that. You can't really do that with Shai, but we'll see whether double teaming Shai and making others beat them in a half court is going to be a somewhat effective strategy as well. But I agree with you. I mean, every advanced stat pretty much that we look at is neck and neck, and it's been pretty close to that, honestly, for the last 2 years. So I don't really, I can't necessarily parse more than that between the two of them. I'm dead bang sure there's nobody else close to Shai at this point in time. But I don't really have that much more to say about this. I think we can probably move on to things that are going to engender more debate. Maybe this is why the MVP debate has been so quote unquote civilized, or maybe because certain fan bases haven't been involved this year.
What are you insinuating?
Philly and Dallas. We're looking at you guys. So I think this is where it starts to get pretty interesting at number 3, moving into this next group. John, who did you have 3 and who else did you have in that group?
I had one tier with one player in it, and that's Giannis. I think he's clearly the third best player in the league. He's playing at a level that in many other years would have him uh, either winning the MVP or certainly in the discussion for it, which like he can't even blast his way into the discussion right now. Carrying a pretty limited Bucks team on many levels. I would argue he is not quite at the level he was at a couple of years ago, especially on the defensive end. Although he's become a better like mid-range shooter, especially, which has given him a little more variability at the offensive end. And I still think like just a dominating two-way player, right? Who does give you a lot of, even though he's not a spot-up shooter, he does give you a lot of versatility in how you can choose to play depending on what position you slot him into. And I think we've seen the Bucks benefit from that in many ways. So I had him alone in his own tier.
Danny?
I have Giannis third as well, but I don't have him in his own tier. I think a lot of John's argument holds weight with me. And with Giannis, he's a player, this is what we're, the season we're talking about. I'm thinking of it as his age. This is age 30 season, whether like we're starting this will probably be age 31. His defense game by game is not what it was, but he's still a very good defensive player. And we saw that in the NBA Cup. And he, as a playoff player, I think we'll see that again. Now, what version of the Bucks we see in the playoffs, the sample between now and then is going to be a little bit weird. But Giannis is great, is talented enough in that end, even if he's not doing it possession by possession. But he has elevated this Bucks team. I don't know that like he has been as dominant as like I don't think he's separated himself totally as far. I had him, he to me he would be third in my per minute MVP, but also there are some durability concerns. The idea that how many games is he going to play? Not that he's going to have these extended injuries like some of the guys we'll talk about presumably at some point, but I also, because Giannis is a very good version of what he does, but he can't fit with everybody. He's gotten the mid-range shot, but he doesn't have a great three-point shot. So what do you want to play at the 5 next to him? Do you want to play him at the 5 purely? It's a little bit tricky. So I have Giannis third, and I did feel confident in Giannis at third. The other two guys I have in this tier, I'm a little shakier on, but I do have two other players.
Are you guys concerned that the Milwaukee Bucks offense hasn't been that great this year? Now, part of that has been when Giannis has been off the floor, but it's him, a all-time great point guard who's maybe fallen down a little bit, but still demands like a double team on any pick and roll, essentially. And Giannis never plays, basically, unless Andre Jackson Jr. is out there, which he rarely is, never plays with any other non-shooter. And yet their offense is just kind of like, solid. Like I thought that when you put Dame and Giannis together, that was going to be like one of the best offenses that we've seen. And that just hasn't been the case. And we haven't seen Giannis in the playoffs for a couple years. He hasn't, I guess he finished the 23 playoffs, but Jimmy Butler also finished those playoffs for him.
Sure.
And then obviously he didn't play at all last year. He is 30 at this point. We haven't seen him dominate in the playoffs since 2022. I just have a few too many concerns about Giannis at this point. The defense too, especially the ability to bring it every night. Now he could certainly dispel those in the playoffs and get up to the top of this next tier for me. But I don't think that he's just so clearly better than Luka Doncic or Jason Tatum right now. I think there are very good arguments to have either of those guys above him. And in fact, I have Giannis 5th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
I have the same 3 players in the tier, by the way. I'm sure.
So I had, when we talk about those other 2 players, I did have them 4 and 5 in the next tier by themselves. So not too much disagreement there. I just think they have so many shitty players out there. So much of the time,
but not on offense though. Like
no,
got, like,
still
all
on
these, like,
offense.
40%.
Like yay! Like Taurean Prince is theoretically a shooter. Wow! Like that's a great player you're starting next to him. Yeah, I'm so scared. Yeah.
Well, he shoots Gary like 50% on threes. AJ Green, Gary Trent. These are all like they put all 40% 3-point shooters around him. Like you shouldn't need like what is Taurean Prince not doing? Like driving, like creating for Giannis? Like he should be creating for those guys. Like there should be enough where those guys aren't getting in his way.
They just don't do it. Like they're just not threatening players, even though they can shoot.
Okay. I mean, I will say that Giannis is not benefiting as much from being set up as he was back when they had Chris Middleton and he was being used more as a role man. But my point is, I'm not sure that Giannis ball makes you into a great offense. I think, and I don't think that he's like so good defensively now that he closes the gap. So I mean, I would say, yeah. So like Tatum, is going to play more than Giannis.
Yes.
I mean, here's the other thing about Giannis too, is like he does, if he's off the ball, he's still is going to like not get guarded that well. If he's spacing the floor, like, so like, we got to keep in mind that everything offensively in Milwaukee has been built around Giannis since 2018, and Tatum could play on any team. Whereas Giannis, if Giannis doesn't have Brook Lopez next to him, he's not really good enough rim protector to play center. You'd have to then find another center who couldn't shoot, and now Giannis's impact is really muted. So that's the other thing and I'm just like, he's not quite the same all-encompassing force in transition anymore. Still shoots 61% from the foul line, which is not great either. You can kind of slow him down that way a little bit. So I think that there's just, he hasn't quite shown me enough to be like, okay, let me ask you this, John. In last year's NBA Finals, if we did this exercise, you would have no problem with Luka being above Giannis, right?
Yeah, I probably would. I at last year, during last year's NBA Finals, yeah, I probably would have had that. I would have had more durability concerns about Giannis at that point. I mean, he has played most of this season, and Luka has kind of gone the other way. And then I didn't expect Giannis to play this well in his age 30 season, honestly.
Yeah. Danny, make the case for why Doncic and Tatum should at least be in this group.
I think it's interesting because I think the cases are different for both of them, even though they're similar levels of players. So for Luka, it is the idea that he can run a very high level offense, but basically being there himself, he's been a part of two talented groups with the Mavericks and the Lakers this year due to an unforeseeable circumstance with the trade. And he is extremely limited defensively. He is the worst defender by far of these three individuals. But the other thing that Luka has is that he has been the best player offensively on an NBA Finals team recently, and in a different way than Jason Tatum was. Tatum was the best player on the Celtics last year, but he didn't win Conference Finals MVP or Finals MVP. I agreed with both of those decisions. That isn't to say that he's worse than Jaylen Brown in any way, shape, or form. So Tatum's plug and play ability to me has him in this conversation, not only on offense, but on defense, that he can fill in multiple roles. As Nate has brought up before, there are times that he makes the Celtic system work by defending the other team's center, which is an even bigger luxury than some of these other guys. He can do that at times. And you could argue that the Celtic system helps him too, but I think that Tatum could work anywhere. Whereas Luka doesn't work everywhere, but the places he works better. And so to me, I thought it was appropriate to have these three guys in one tier. I think all of them could be the best player in the championship team, but you need to do a little bit of work to make it happen.
Couple things to react to there. One, with Luka, I'm kind of taking out the whole injury thing that happened from earlier this year. He's 26. I think he's working his way back into shape. He hasn't had any problems with the Lakers. Of course, we'll see what happens in this year's playoffs. I don't know that he still is quite at peak form yet, but we're talking about a season starting right now, and I think he would get back to that point. And if we started a season now, Giannis would finish it at 31. And then Tatum, I've long said, yeah, I just don't think he's really a top 5 player. I don't think his skill set is that good. I think a few things have happened to change that. One is he's gotten a little bit better. He's having one of his better shooting seasons. I also just think that he is someone that fits in any system, and also is just not going to complain and not going to whine. Like, he's going to do what it takes to win. Like, he's really helped to set the Celtics culture. A lot of players would like whine about having to guard the center so that Kristaps Porzingis could stay on the back line and block shots, and Jason Tatum just does it. Even though his own individual statistics were compromised, even though he didn't win the Finals MVP and Eastern Conference Finals MVP, and because he wasn't shooting well, but now he's back to doing that this year. But I think the bigger thing is just like, I used to be like, well, there's always going to be someone better on one of these teams that's going to lead them past Tatum. I just don't think that's the case anymore. I actually think once you get past Jokic and Shai, it's kind of we have a lot of depths going down to maybe like the 25th best player in the NBA. But I think sort of like 4, 5 to 10, not really as strong as it's been in the past. So it's kind of like the rest of the field has fallen back, and Tatum has improved slightly, and that's why I now have him in the top 3.
I want to give some credit to Tatum's growth as a playmaker too. I think that's something that we've talked about at times over the year, but that's another thing that has strengthened his case. But Nate, I think that we are and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. We're in a really interesting point in terms of top 10 players, because there has been some dissent from some of the older guys. We haven't talked yet about anybody who's further along than age 31, but there are some lions that are going to come up, at least in my ordering. But they've taken steps back. They're not the players that they were in their prime. And there are some great young players who are ascending, but have not ascended yet. And so I don't know that I'll have Jason Tatum 5th again next year, but he doesn't have to be. That's not a part of this requirement. And so we're in this interesting phase, which, the old Lions could have stepped down earlier than they did. They've lasted a really long time. And the young guys maybe either could have stepped up faster, or there could have been other guys that stepped up earlier. So I think Tatum, he's kind of a bridge in the top 5. But I do think, we've talked about this over the years, he will get surpassed, but he earned his spot.
Anything else on this debate, John, or should we move on to our next tranche here?
Yeah, I think we can move. The one thing I'll say for Tatum, I mean, Danny, you sort of alluded to it. I do think, like, he had a tendency to stop the ball as a younger player that I think has slowly gone away, and it's made the Celtics even harder to deal with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point too. All right, John, who are the players in your next group, and pick the top one to discuss?
Yeah,
further.
I had 3 players in my next group, even though one of them is very different from the other 2. But the next player on my list is Victor Wembanyama.
Okay.
I just like he's just so absurd. And just how many times, just in any random Spurs game, how many times are you just left cackling by something that Wembanyama did? Because it's just so ridiculous for somebody of his size to be doing these things. And then you look at the impact stats, like, yeah, he's really good. Even arguably leaving money on the table in various areas right now, which I think the Spurs still do. Like, he still dominates the game. Like, he's still awesome. So this elevator is only going up from here, obviously, as he, as long as he stays healthy, knock on wood. And I sort of write off the blood clot thing as sort of a random one-off, which hopefully it is.
Me too.
And so I think 6 is like the lowest you can put him right now. And he, like, when we do this a year from now, we might be talking about him like right there with Jokic and SGA.
What
do you think, Danny?
I have Wembanyama in this tier as well. I don't have him 6th. I have him 7th. But it's close. I have him in the same tier. And for Wembanyama, we might as well keep going with him. He is the most valuable defensive player in the league already, and that's age 22. Like, we're just gonna see, or let me pull it up, whether he's age 21 or 22.
Yeah, 21 right now.
21 now. Yeah, so I was inconsistent in my marking in my document about which year guys were. So yeah, it would be his age 22 season. So Wembanyama can do what he needs to protect the rim. Was a huge part of what Spurs did this year. And then I do think that so I have Wembanyama a little bit lower originally, and then when I was really thinking about, well, if you put him on a randomized team, if you're going through a season, what if his offensive wrinkles get ironed out? And I think a lot of them do, because the exploration of the studio space is good for his development, but it also doesn't make him a better player right now. And I think another team might not have the patience for it, which would make him actually a more effective player right now. The crazy turnover percentage that he has, that's going to tone down. But the other reason why Wembanyama, like, I don't have him 7th, but I agree with John's general thesis of that it's hard to have him lower than this, is that we saw a lot of growth from him as a shooter over the course of the portion of the season that he played. And so if you're, building this out, I'm not saying that Wembanyama is definitively, oh, he's going to shoot he's going to shoot 38% like he did a lot of the later part of the year definitively for the rest of his career. I can't say that, but I can say that it's very possible that he ended the year shooting 35% on 9.5 threes per 36. I think it's very possible he does better than that next year. And then that and some reduction in turnovers, then you're really cooking with gas, not only as a dominant defensive player, but as a much better offensive player than some of the other recent dominant defensive players.
I have Victor in this group because I agree with what y'all are saying, that he could just take the next step and even be in that Jokic Shai conversation possibly. And I thought he would have been my defensive player of the year. I don't demerit him any for the DVT diagnosis. Most guys have gotten past that in their careers. No reason to think that he won't do that right now, knock on wood. But I think he's just fucking around a little bit too much still.
Agreed.
He's just not, it's not a LaMelo Ball level, but and that may ultimately be the best thing for his career, to continue, as you said, Danny, exploring the studio space. The Spurs have kind of been doing that. The Spurs also just haven't really tried their hardest to win games. They brought in some guys, and Victor was so good that they were, a totally good team when he was out there. He's plus 2.5 net rating when he is on the floor, and they are much worse when he doesn't play because their backup center situation was awful as part of that. But Victor Wembanyama has finished 45 roll man possessions at the basket all season. Like that, it's just like he's still, and he takes 9.6 3-point attempts per 36 minutes. And when he does roll to the basket, he averages 1.6 points per possession. That's pretty good. He should be basically the best roll man of all time. For context, Anthony Davis finishes 5 roll man possessions at the basket every single game. So Victor is at 1 because he played 46 games. And I think defensively, he still is probably the most impactful player, but he also makes a lot of mistakes. I think he hasn't learned how to play hard all the time. And so to me, having not seen that in the playoffs anymore, frankly, him not having been through that crucible is something like, I think his game just needs to be forged a little bit more than it has. So I'm not comfortable with putting him above guys who have really produced, that we know are leading high level playoff teams that have performed in the playoffs before, even though I fully acknowledge that he may end up being better than those guys. And I have him in this group. I thought that Stephen Curry had to be above him at this point in time for that reason, with this late surge that he's been on. So he was actually my number 6, although I think there are arguments for 7 guys to be in this group. Wow. So where did y'all have Curry?
I have Curry 6th. So I have him 6th. I have Wembanyama 7th, and I have somebody else in this tier that we'll talk about in a minute. And so we can talk about Curry. I mean, you said the idea of like forged, and I think Curry is pretty quintessentially forged at this point. I mean, beyond the fact that he's 30, he's going to be 37. Basically a 118 offensive rating when Curry is on the floor. And when you think about, the Warriors do have at times more shooters down. They have more, Jimmy Butler replacing some of their other guys gives them another way that they can generate offense, even though it's not shooting. But he's the best shooter of all time. His off-ball gravity is real. And he's not a great defender, but he's good enough to function within a system. That's largely been true for his entire career. He's been a part of great defenses. Hasn't been the reason they were great. And so I think of Curry and Wembanyama, interestingly, kind of paralleling. And generally, I think offense is more valuable than defense. And so for me, for Curry, I have fewer doubts. I think Wembanyama has more room to grow. But I think for me, having Curry above Wembanyama, but having them in the same tier feels about right, to acknowledge Wembanyama's upside, but also acknowledge, who has been the better player overall.
John, what are your thoughts on Curry?
I had a tie at 7 between Steph Curry and LeBron James. The two guys who are still unbelievably still doing it, still been pretty durable too the last couple years, which I think is the surprising part. In Curry's case, I think he moves to number 1 if you have Zach Edey playing a drop. But Otherwise, like
Zach Edey was plus 12 in that game in 30 minutes, John.
that was the most unbelievable stat. Well, I mean, Islo did a smart thing. He started matching up Edey with the non-Curry units like after the first quarter, which I think helped that. But anyway, getting back to Curry though, I mean, he and James over an 82 game regular season can't have that same impact every night, and we've seen that at various points this year. But we also know that when you get to games that matter, and they showed it even in Paris, right? That when you get to those games, they have a level they can get to that's kind of a notch above what they do in a normal regular season game. And the other players we discuss, I would say, are unproven at best in this area. So they get a little extra bump because of that. I think LeBron, especially like the second half, his November was bad. I don't know if y'all remember, like he was struggling.
I remember,
it looked like, this might be it. And then the whole second half of the season, he's been lights out, right?
Especially defensively, he's really brought it at a level that I wasn't anticipating. And these playoffs will be fascinating because he's got more playmaking around him with Luka and Reeves than he's ever had. And so is he going to actually be able to like anchor this Lakers defense? Because I don't think Jackson Hayes is going to do it. You know, is he going to guard like Jokic, or he guarded Şengün in the Houston game the other day? So I definitely have LeBron in this group as well.
And then LeBron,
Steph,
the other thing, LeBron as a shooter, this late in life renaissance as a 3-point shooter, I think has really helped. Because that was always the weakness in the past, that you could kind of slough off him and not worry so much about him shooting threes, especially off the catch. And he's become much more threatening in that respect.
My one reservation with LeBron is I don't think there's that many guys that he can just beat one-on-one unless it's in the post. He gets a lot in transition, great cutter, and can just get to the foul line some, and he's improved his spot up. But if you just switch a pick and roll with him with the center, like I don't know that he's like killing that guy. So that's why I would have him slightly lower maybe. And Curry, I wouldn't have had him this high a month and a half ago, basically before the Butler trade, but he's been on just one of those incredible Steph Curry heaters since then that I wasn't sure that he still had left in him. Particularly, he's gotten to the basket more during that period as well. That's what I thought really had fallen off. And I think he's having his best defensive season since the last championship year. But I've got a lot more guys I want to throw into this mix here too.
Wow. Okay. The other thing we have to talk about with Curry though, the crazy ass passes.
Oh yeah.
Like guaranteed at least one every game where it's just like, my man, like what were you doing there?
The hit passes to no one, the behind the back passes directly to opponents. It's definitely a part of the Curry sauce at this point. And, as somebody who's covered his entire career, it's been infuriating at times. It's not as infuriating for some reason with him as it is with Draymond. But yeah, and he'll do it in big moments too. I mean, we saw it in the finals. Yeah. It's not something that you can separate. And speaking of Warriors in the finals, one of the other guys I have in this group is Kevin Durant. This has been a weird 12 months for him in terms of this ranking because his individual stats have been totally fine this year. The Suns obviously didn't have a great
more than totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's also, part of this is if we're the difference between in some ways top 10 players and Nate and I doing position rankings is that you're comparing them to great players at other positions. And so how well you can run a team, how you can be the person who's they're looking to. Like that is it's not the essential part. Talent and everything else is important too, but he deserves some blame for the Phoenix Suns being this abject tire fire. And so like Durant, I think that it's this, I didn't feel comfortable putting him lower than this. He's doing very well individually. I don't think that he is like the reason the Suns are potentially failing, not even making the play-in. And this is not in the year where like the West has 14 juggernauts. Like there was actually some wiggle room here. But so were you guys conflicted with KD the way I was?
I got to be honest, I didn't have him in my top 10.
Oh wow.
I just think he's
Yeah.
dropped off a little. When you look at the course of the last 2 seasons, they just aren't at his previous level.
Yeah, I had him at the very. I'm struggling with whether to have him in this group, but I had, as I mentioned, this group goes very deep for me into the teens. I ultimately, just because it's been so bad this year, like there's just something you have to conclude at this point that the individual stats just aren't adding up. And I mean, in his defense, he's being asked to do too much at his age. He can't, being a secondary rim protector, which he still is semi-decent at, but he's not doing as much there as he did maybe in his last Nets season, where I thought he was awesome defensively. And he doesn't really make the game easier for his teammates at this point. I would say every once in a while they'll start going high pick and roll and teams will double him and he can make the basic passes out of that. But he's not that heliocentric offensive force. I mean, you look at a guy with 64% true shooting and 29 usage and doesn't turn it over that much, although maybe more than he should. And you're like, well, how is this guy not insanely valuable? And he plays one of the most important positions. But I think there's also just something to the fact that they've disappointed as a team. He didn't have a good playoffs last year. He got outplayed by Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards last year. He didn't have a great playoffs in 23. So it looks close enough to the Kevin Durant that it's always been, but we just have, you alluded to it, John, like we just haven't seen the results on the floor for him, and all of the impact metrics would really agree that he's not particularly in consideration, certainly for the 6-7 range, maybe in the early teens.
I also think his playmaking has dropped off, and the assist numbers are definitely down, and I don't think it's because he forgot how to pass. I think it's because teams aren't as panicked when he has the ball and aren't sending as much help his way.
But
So
here's also how here's how I might characterize it too. He still is an unbelievable shot maker. He's probably the best shot maker in basketball. Like, our numbers have his shot quality at 48%, and he makes 60.
Right.
That's field goal percentage.
Crazy.
Like that's insane. But he doesn't generate as many good shots for himself as he used to. He's just still as good as he ever has been at making the bad ones. But he's not getting to the rim. He's not getting to the foul line as much. He's just not creating that crisis for the defense. He's taking 6 threes for 36, making 43% of them. But he's not coming off of screens for a 3. Like, he's more just sort of taking them within the flow. Like, he's never wanted to hunt that shot unless he's bringing the ball up in transition. And so he just a lot, he's getting into the mid range, and if you don't have the right guy, and that's the other thing I would say too, is I think there's just the universe of guys who can guard him one-on-one and he's not going to absolutely kill you is larger than it was 3 years ago.
That's true.
All right. I'm going to have can I throw a
absolutely
probably controversial name out here?
Oh, let's go.
I have Evan Mobley firmly in my top 10.
I had him in my top 10 as well.
I had him just hanging on. I had him at 10.
I have him at 10 as well.
Well, I mean, that's got to be controversial for a lot of people, for a guy who had never been an all-star until this year. And also, we talked about how we want to see it in the playoffs. We have not. He had a good series once Mitchell went down last year against the Celtics, but this is clearly his first regular season at this type of level. So are we violating our own rules by having him this high? What do you think, John?
I think we had Anthony Davis in our top 10 last year, I think. And I think Evan Mobley has become a better version of Anthony Davis than Anthony Davis in some ways. Gives you a little more of his own shot creation. The shooting has come around to an extent, which I think is a big deal. And then defensively, he's a monster, right? He might win Defensive Player of the Year this year. And he gives you, I mean, one of the things we talk about, especially with bigs, is schematic versatility. He gives it to you because he can play 4 or 5. He now more plausibly can play inside or out. Still doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but 37%. Good enough passer. Doesn't really turn it over that much. solid enough on the boards. Like I think he just offers you a lot without taking anything off the table.
And he can also play 4 or 5, which I think is pretty big when we're considering putting him in different situations, different teams. And he's probably going to be my defensive player of the year. I think he's the second best defensive player in basketball. I don't know if he's the second best playoff defensive player, and he's got a lot of work to do on this Cavs team defensively, given some of their perimeter players that they have. Well, so yeah, go ahead, Danny.
I want to give a little bit of a framing here because I have a group of players that are in this conversation. I don't know that we'll spend a lot of time on all of them, but really they're all of the guys that were left that we haven't discussed yet. LeBron is already ahead of this list. They're all dominant, or they're all really good on one end of the floor and weaker on the other. And so it's just reconciling, well, who are you more comfortable with their strengths and their weaknesses? And for Mobley, why I have him ahead of some of the other guys like Jalen Brunson and Anthony Davis is because he's really great on that end, but he's a more versatile version of a defensive player. So you could fit him alongside a lot of other guys in a lot of other schemes. And then offensively, we've seen some real growth from Mobley. And so you could play him alongside a lot of great versions of offensive players. You could do it with more of a Lucas style player. You could do it with Garland and Mitchell, who he already is playing with now. And I think that, so for let's say Mobley versus Anthony Davis, the comparison that John made, I think that Mobley is not only better at his strengths right now, but I also think that his game just intuitively fits, and he's also younger. So if we're pricing in, well, it's a new season starting today, I'd rather take the guy who's 24 than the guy who's 32.
And yeah, I think the biggest thing that's really convincing, I don't know that he's actually improved that much defensively this year, but the fact that he at least can't be left wide open on threes now. But he's taking 4 per 36, and he's making 37% on them. But the bigger thing is just that he's so good off the dribble now. If you put a smaller player on him, or you blitz the pick and roll and he gets the ball in space, he's just going to work his way to the basket and just dunk it, or get a short range little hook shot. Where if you saw him trying to score at the basket 2 years ago in that Knicks series, in that circumstance, he just couldn't do it. And then you consider also that he can play 4 or 5, basically any role you want for him offensively or defensively at those positions. And then he never gets hurt either. He had the one surgery last year, but other than that, he's been extremely durable. He also never fouls, which is really important for a big, and that's probably the biggest reason Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't in consideration for this group for me, is that he just makes too many dumb plays and he can't stay on the floor. So yeah, I had Mobley here, and he, Wembanyama, and then Anthony Davis, who I also had below Mobley, but still in this group. All have somewhat similar arguments as two-way bigs, but who are all better on defense. Who would be your next person we haven't talked about yet, John?
So Evan Mobley was not my highest ranked Cavalier.
Oh
yeah,
I had Donovan Mitchell 9th. I think it's time to give this guy his flowers. I think he's 27. I think he's having even though he hasn't shot well, I think he's having his best season. I think his defense has gotten better. I think he's really dangerous one-on-one player. I think he's shown that in the playoffs, even though his teams haven't succeeded. I think every time I watch Cleveland, he does something that just jolts me out of my seat, even now. I know he's battled the knees and stuff, but he's been pretty durable this year. I think it's time to give this guy his flowers. Like he's really good. I just can't take anyone else who's left ahead of him.
You like him better than Brunson?
Oh yeah.
Why?
Oh, I think there's a more schematic fit with him. I mean, Brunson, you have to put the ball in his hands and be the Brunson show, right? Like he can do some stuff off the ball. He showed some of it in Dallas. And then I think Mitchell's a little better defensively than Brunson too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Neither is great shakes, but yeah, I mean, I probably would prefer Mitchell a little bit. Brunson will take some charges, but he's more like neither of them are going to switch, but Mitchell is kind of better at like hedging, getting back to his man, or if he gets caught in the post, he could be a little bit better. Yeah, Brunson versus Mitchell is a really interesting question for me, because I think there are some teams you'd prefer Brunson. Like this Knicks team, I think is better with Brunson.
Well, if you have no point guard, then yeah, Brunson's more valuable.
Yeah.
But I think in any
John,
other scenario.
John, what do you think about Mitchell's playoff record? How does that factor in for you?
I mean, I think his playoff record isn't that bad. He had a bad series against the Knicks in 23, right? But he was awesome in the bubble against Denver. Then they lost in 7 anyway. He single-handedly won a game in Boston last year after having a very good series against Orlando in the first round. And then the Cavs just, frittered apart due to injuries and whatever in a series where they were already big underdogs. I just think it's been about, like, that Clippers series, I think was more about everything else that was going on than it was about Mitchell. I mean, Mitchell was battling through some stuff too, actually. But it was that Clippers series was more about kind of everything else was going on for them, especially at the defensive end. And then Terrence Mann having the game of his life, obviously, in the clincher.
I think Mitchell is a little bit too inconsistent offensively for me. I like it seems like he just has a lot of these like dud games. So he can also go off, but they're just like, if he's not feeling right, or he just can throw up a weird like 3 out of 15. And against good teams, it seems to happen a fair amount too. Like there's certain teams he
did that in Oklahoma City when I saw them. Yeah, he definitely had one of those.
No, exactly, right? Like that's and he also just had like a month where he shot 19% from 3. And so it just like maybe like his shot isn't there when his knees aren't feeling good, or he's not getting to the basket as much. That's ultimately, I don't know. It seems like I think he's clearly better than, maybe I have him above some of these other guards we're talking about, like Tyrese Halliburton, Lillard, Garland, Devin Booker, Kyrie, if he was healthy, would be in that discussion too. So I think he's probably at the top of that group, but I'm not sure he's like, and Brunson too. I'm not sure he's clearly better than any of them. Maybe he'll show me that in the playoffs this year. He's also just like, his efficiency hasn't been that great this season either.
I'm banking on that bouncing up a little bit because it's at low ebb compared to his career numbers. So I priced in a little bit that he's closer to a 60% true shooting player.
Well, I don't know how often he's gotten to that level, and he's playing on one of like the best shooting teams of all time. Like he's had a pretty easy lift this year, and it's a little concerning to me that his individual stats aren't better.
Just because we haven't talked about him that much, and I have Jalen Brunson technically 11th, but I have him in the same tier. I think we should give a little bit of the argument for him. So Brunson, I mean, he has a huge role within the Knicks offense. 45.5% total creation, 15.8 playmaking usage is well above the positional average, and the Knicks offense has been really been really good.
And for those of y'all who are turning in briefly, those stats are creation metrics. Total creation is the percentage of your team's plays that you either shoot, turn it over, or throw a pass that leads to a shot or free throws. And that playmaking, we call it passing creation, is the percentage of the time that you throw a pass that leads to a shot or free throws for your team. So it's basically what percentage of all plays for your team are you involved in.
And the Knicks offense has been very good with Brunson on the floor, both this year and last year. And of course, they have Karl-Anthony Towns. They have very good offensive talent this year, but he did it last year when they had, in my opinion, weaker offensive talent. And so Brunson can do that. I thought he had a playoff run that reflected on him well. And so he doesn't get really a demerit from that. I mean, he brutalized Andrew Nembhard for a lot of that series. Another team that got dragged down with injuries, like seemingly every Eastern Conference playoff series last year. But for Brunson, I agree with John that it's like, if it's Brunson, it's the Brunson show. But where I disagree is that the Brunson show is pretty damn good. And it's not perfect, but none of these guys are. And I also think that with Brunson, and we've seen this before, he's not a great defensive player, but he's also not going to be like the constant point of failure guy who gets picked at. And so for me, that makes him so like I have him higher than Tyrese Halliburton, for example, because I worry more
Yeah.
about Halliburton in that respect. And so for me, Brunson, like I have more confidence that Brunson can be the guy than Mitchell can be the guy. Mitchell might be better as a secondary offense player, which arguably he is with this Cavs team. I think Garland has been the superior offensive player overall this season, but you don't always get that opportunity. And it's hard with these kinds of guys, especially once we're getting down into 10. Like there's a chance you're going to have a better player on your team, but there's not that great a chance that you're going to have a better offensive player on your team, because if you're one of the 10 through 12 best guys, there aren't that many picks above you.
Where did y'all have Anthony Edwards? I think there's an argument for him in this group too.
So I had a tier 9 through 12 that Anthony Edwards was part of.
I have a tier.
Yeah, that's right where I had him too.
I have a tier from 8 to 12 without Edwards, and then he's pretty much the top of the next one. So I guess he'd probably be 13, but I didn't formally number after that.
He's still frustrating at times offensively. You want him to see the floor better. You want him to be a little more efficient as a scorer. Where he really moves up to me is with defense and durability. You know, those two things I think kind of set him apart. He has become more efficient now that half his shots are threes. Still probably needs a little more craft at the he just relies so much on athleticism and then wonders why he doesn't get any calls. And he's like, he needs a little more craft and, you know, studying James Harden a little bit about how to get himself to the line a little more. But I mean, he's a really good player. He's 23. He pretty much delivered in the playoffs last season. So I think he definitely had a case to be in here. It's weird because on sub levels, I think he's kind of overrated. And yet I think his combination of defense and durability isn't that common in his position and his kind of player archetype. And so he's underrated in that respect.
People now, there was a time when people would look back at Kobe's stats and be like, you know, his true shooting wasn't really that great. And he was shooting all the time. Like, was he really that great of an offensive player? Sort of in the early moments, the analytics movement. And there are two things you could look at. One was how good the offense was when he was on the floor. That's not necessarily something that Edwards has as a big feather in his cap. But the thing that he does that's similar to Kobe is he can just generate the same type of shots. Like, yeah, maybe he's not the absolute most efficient player in the regular season, but you can't stop him from shooting those same shots in the playoffs, basically, unless you double team, like we saw what the Nuggets did with him in the playoffs last year. And then in that double overtime game they played earlier this week, where they just, like, anytime they got into any kind of a matchup they didn't like, they just had to straight double him to get the ball out of his hands. I don't know if that was the right strategy, but they felt like they had to do that. So that's where you make the argument. And then also just that he can ramp up the effort level in the playoffs. He's not going to get attacked defensively the way some of these players are. And he's always, it seems like, played a little better in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. And we've got a 3-year track record of that now. So I think he belongs in this group again. I'm still like, that's why I have such a high tier. Like, all right, are we sure that Evan Mobley is better than Anthony Edwards? No, I think like that, like they could have different playoffs this year. And like, and it's not like I'm averse to changing it after the playoffs. It's more just that I'm like, yeah, I could see one of them being better. I could see the other one being better. I'm not really sure which of those guys is going to be more valuable.
I think we're supposed to assert that we 100% think one guy is better than the other because it makes a better podcast. I think that's the rule, right?
I think we've named everyone here that I really had like in consideration. So we're at what, 14 guys that we've talked about here now?
So I have one other player. I mean,
okay.
We can't just dismiss Anthony Davis, right?
Yes, that's.
He's in here too. That's the guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's right there with Mobley and Wembanyama.
Yeah. You can take your earmuffs off, Nico Harrison. You can listen now.
Yeah, so like I think the Davis had been pretty durable for the past year and a half. He had this groin issue that's been popping up here and there, but he's come back to play for the Mavs. Looks pretty good. He's gonna be 32, because age 32 season coming up here. But another guy who like stays on the court, doesn't foul. I don't know that his regular season effort, particularly defensively, is as consistent as Mobley. I also don't think he has the same impact as Wembanyama. Like, I don't think Davis is consistently a top 5 defensive player of the year type of guy, but he still, I think, brings it enough in the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the other thing that hurts his defense is that he falls down so much in the course of a game that you get transitions off of that.
Yeah, you have to actually be standing on the defensive half of the court.
Fall down more than this guy does?
Joel Embiid does.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, sadly, Joel, not a primary part of this discussion. Yeah, I think there's really, we're pretty familiar with what Davis is at this point. Now, the one thing that concerns me and why I would have Mobley a little higher than him is I think they're pretty equal defensively. Like, there's some things Davis does better, some things Mobley does better. Mobley's more consistent defensively over the course of a season. And then I think Mobley can play the 4 and Davis really can't. Like, they're going to try to play him at the 4 next to Lively and
it's going to be awful.
And oh, big surprise, they closed with him at the 5. Why do you think they did that?
Yeah, and I'm not willing to move Davis down a tier because he doesn't want to play the 4. He doesn't want to play the 5, even though that's his natural position. But I'm close. Like,
okay.
When you're building a team, though, if a guy doesn't want to do the role he's best suited for, it is a problem. Like, and we're going to potentially see that with the Mavericks, who now have like 3 of their 6 best players play the same position, and that is a challenge that they're going to have to deal with for probably the next 2 years, for the entirety of their window, whatever that window is.
Yeah, well, and I would love for Anthony Davis to be able to play the 4. We've seen a lot of teams be able to have success with those double big looks, but like, he doesn't actually have the skill set to do that. I mean, he had a much better shooting season that one year, 1920, when they won the championship, but he just has been awful since then from the outside. Even if it's and the other concern I have about him too is just as a one-on-one scorer, he's just not that great to me.
Like, so that what moved him down to me from like consideration for the top 8 was that he depends so much on assisted baskets, and you've seen that throughout his career.
Yeah, there was a time maybe when it looked like his jumper was coming around, or he could just overwhelm guys physically a little bit more in the post. Like, we're just not seeing that as much. He's not as deadly in transition as he used to be offensively either. And so he still has a lot of usage, but he kind of gets there by just taking a lot of bad jumpers that probably aren't going to go in.
Mm-hmm.
That he, like, his usage, he has a higher usage than Mobley, but it should be the same as Mobley. He's just taking more bad shots to get to that usage. Still a great pick and roll big though. Yeah, so that's really our top 14. Is there anyone else that you feel should even have like been in consideration here?
Yeah, so I had a tier of 3 players who on any given day are capable of being a top 6 guy, but are just not there, are not dependable enough to break into this. If you're talking about picking a team from the start of the year, at the top of that is Jimmy Butler. He's going to miss games. He always has the potential to light things on fire at the end of his stay with your team. But I mean, we're seeing it in Golden State. We've seen it in Miami in the playoffs. We've seen him, in all these postseasons. He is capable of performing at a very high level on the biggest stages for bits and pieces.
Yeah, I just don't think his individual offense is good enough to really be in this conversation at this point. Like, I don't think he can do what he did in those playoff runs.
Even 2 years ago, you think that's just not a thing anymore? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because like Golden State is like, there's been times when Steph is out or when he's coming off the bench, and now Golden State doesn't run any pick and roll. So maybe if he ran more pick and roll, that would be something that we would see more of. And like, he's as good as you can possibly be without being a wing who guards the other team's best player, and without being a shooter, and without being a primary scorer. He's just so unbelievable at everything else. Like, his foul drawing is just absolutely ridiculous. It must be so fucking annoying to lose to that guy, because you're just like, you're like, oh, they're bailing him out again. But like, it is a foul. Or your dumb players went for the pump fake again. Like, you're like that. Jaren Jackson Jr. Who else was on that list of 3 that you had, John?
Kawhi Leonard and Joel Embiid. And I think Embiid, like, I needed to like have some placeholder for his spot in case he comes back and is the guy we saw before. We can postulate about what the chances are of that happening, but he was so freaking awesome before he got hurt. Not this season, but the year before. And so we at least have to acknowledge that and keep him in this discussion. Kawhi Leonard has started to look like that guy lately. And he's playing
the siren song of Kawhi Leonard. Lash me to the mast.
Exactly. And, you know, we know there's going to be like a press release ahead of game 4 in the playoffs or something, you know, like DNP,
oh no, the press release won't come until like 3 weeks after the playoff run, and they'll be like, "Oh, by the way, he had a torn ACL."
By the way, we had to amputate. Yeah, but he's been really good lately. I mean, if he's upright at the beginning of a playoff series, you are scared if you're his opponent, right?
You are. So
yeah, I mean, he's starting to show enough that, like, because he was so awesome last year, and he started to show that this last month. I mean, I just broke it down a couple of days ago. So if y'all want to hear more of my thoughts on where he's at right now, go back and listen to that. But yeah, he the way he's playing, he certainly could be in the top 10. It could fall off at any time. What are you gonna say, Danny?
The only other 2 guys I wanted to mention briefly, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on them. I had them in the same tier as Edwards and Mitchell. Are Jaren Jackson Jr. and Tyrese Haliburton. All Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to be 1 tier above this is to not commit as many stupid fouls as he does. That's the only thing he needs to fix. His offensive game has grown a lot. He's a very talented defensive player. These games where the Grizzlies are outscoring their opponent by 7 and he plays 30 minutes because he's not playing 36 and they lose. It's driving me completely crazy. And then the other one is Tyrese Haliburton, where Haliburton, he's not quite the guy that he was at the first half of, was that last year or 2 years ago, where it was just last year, like the 126 offensive rating. It's not quite that, but it's close enough where, like, I believe that he can run a high level offense. I don't trust him quite as much as Jalen Brunson. Nate and I had an extended conversation about those 2 gentlemen in point guard rankings. But I think that when we're in this range where it's like, gets you into the dance, maybe I have Edwards above Haliburton within this tier, in part because I think Edwards is a better playoff performer. But I wanted to mention them because not only are they both here for me, but both of them with a good year, I think could vault into the top
10. Haliburton is a guy I had in this category of a few names that might be most likely to make me look stupid next year for not having him up there, because he is starting to get back to that level. He still doesn't have the same usage. And the 2 other things that give me pause about him is he is so bad on defense. He's easily the worst defensive player of anyone we've discussed.
Well, so individual one-on-one defense, especially. Like,
and like effort level, getting back, like he doesn't fight at all. He just has 0 toughness. And then the other thing that concerns me is just how in the playoffs last year, he would have these like 3 for 7 games where he just wouldn't do anything. It was so weird. I just don't understand why he would have those. And, you know, maybe he wasn't feeling good with the hamstring at that point, but I still can't get that taste out of my mouth, because then he would come back and have 34 points the next night. And you're like, why didn't you like try to like move the orange thing closer to the basket in the previous game? But I think like we've seen him play at a level before that would easily have him into the top 10 of this discussion. And the question is just whether he can get back to that level or not. Let's finish out with this here, John.
Okay.
Who's on that category for you of guys who are like, this guy might make me look real stupid next year for having him this low?
Are we really trying to get ahead of this? Like,
feel free. Yeah.
I mean, can we talk about guys like Franz Wagner or Amen Thompson? Like, is it that point of the party yet?
If you want to, yeah, absolutely. This party can go on as long as you want it to.
I mean,
I didn't know we're getting into guys who might be in the top 10 of their position, but okay.
I mean, Ahmed Thompson, when we do this next year, like might be like a defensive player of the year who is playing point center, right? So I think he's definitely for one of the better teams in the league. So I think he's
I
definitely
mean,
somebody.
it's hard for me to imagine he gets to the point past where like Ben Simmons was at his apex by next year.
Well, so John, here's my question to you. Rudy Gobert, like I've used Rudy Gobert as a proxy a lot of times for like obviously great defensive player, obviously limited offensive player. Do you think that by next year or 2 years from now, Amen Thompson will have a larger overall impact than Gobert did? Like best player
Yeah,
Gobert?
I mean, you don't see a pathway where he's kind of Giannis light.
That's a lot on offense. Like that's a big jump.
No, he'll never be that kind of rim protector either. Like Giannis.
No, I'm talking about at the offensive end, where he's getting downhill, causing lots of transitions, but he also has like he's starting to develop like some pull up games. So it's not just like he's not going to be bombing away from three. Don't get me wrong, but where there's enough there where you're putting the ball in his hands more often. Especially if they get a little more spacing on that team, they might have to contort how they play a little differently. Like part of Houston's problem right now is I think they're still figuring out what they have and how everything fits. Especially with Şengün, as good as he isn't like your traditional like pick and roll dive man. So there's a lot going on there, but I mean he's really good, and he's just like he's accelerating even as the year goes on.
So you're envisioning a new Fischel Giannis. If Giannis is the cream cheese. Yeah, you've been higher on him. I think I'm not saying that hasn't been validated so far. I really liked him obviously in the draft too, but I don't think he has that type of rim pressure. Like Giannis is one of the 4 greatest transition forces in NBA history. Like, and probably the greatest one with the ball, just as far as like a 5-alarm fire as he accelerates towards the basket. So yeah, I don't think Amen would be in this. I think the one guy that we haven't mentioned yet, who's probably going to make All NBA this year, is Cade Cunningham. Why is he not, in discussion for the top 15 right now to you guys? I agree that he's not, but we should discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, he's good. He's definitely but he's still just not super efficient. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. If he could become like, I'm really puzzled why he hasn't shot better from 3 his whole career. Like his shot looks so good, and he's a 34% career shooter on like not crazy volume. And some of that is because he's shooting a lot of them off the dribble, but that hasn't, other guys have been able to do it and get to a much higher level. And he shoots 86 from the line. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you watch him, you're like, yeah, that thing looks great. And it was one of the reasons I had him at 1 the year he came out. And it just hasn't really translated his whole career. Even this year, he's at 35, it's like, okay. And he still makes a ton of turnovers.
I mean, for me, so as Cade has grown a lot, and it wouldn't stun me if in a couple of years he does make this list. But the Pistons,
even next year he might. But I'm
using cleaning the glasses filter, 116.4 offensive rating when Cade Cunningham's on the floor. And yes, the Pistons play a lot of defense first players. That is the thing that they do. But I want to have an offensive engine that I trust a little bit more. And Cade can be a part of a successful defense, but he's not the reason it's successful. So for me, he's a very good player, but to me, he hasn't accomplished what Anthony Edwards has accomplished, what Donovan Mitchell has accomplished. And so he's probably somewhere in the 20s for me, like maybe even in the deep teens potentially. Mm-hmm. And that's great. Like that's a real improvement from where he was, but he doesn't do the things he needs to be great at quite great enough. And his weaknesses aren't so good. And if he got a little bit better as a shooter, got a little bit better as a defender, but for me, it's more the offense, being more efficient individually, driving better offense. If he can do that and prove that over the next year, yeah, he can be in this area.
Couple of things I'll add to that. A couple of good and a couple bad. Detroit's transition game, he's really been driving that statistically. When he's on the floor, they're the number 1 running offense, which is crazy because he's not run it down your throat type of guy you would think. But then when he goes off the floor, they don't really run. as much. And then also really provides some secondary rim protection. 18% contest rate, allows 58% shooting at the rim. That's like the same as your average center would allow. Now there's other guys who are involved in that too. In that defense, he's probably contesting some with other players, but that still is a very good number for this player type who's got the ball that much.
He's had some crazy blocks this year for a guy who you don't really regard as like a pogo athlete, like chase downs and stuff. Like I just think his timing for that is just immaculate.
But the big thing he's got to improve is just his shot making. Our shot quality has him at 50%, and he's making 51.3 field goal percentage. So that's with his shot diet. He's either got to take more efficient shots or he's got to make more of these ones that he's taking, to your point, John. And that may occur. I think like these playoffs are going to be pretty fascinating. I think he's going to have whoever they play in the first round. I think he's going to have a pretty good matchup. Like none of those defenses really scare me if I'm Cade Cunningham. So whether it's the Knicks or the Bucks or the Pacers, and I think that could it might be a chance for him to really go off. And he's been getting more efficient as the season has gone on, and certainly his floor raising is very valuable when you're in at this level. Darius Garland too. I think like the offensive stats for him have been really awesome. Like his stats are better than Tyrese Halliburton this season, but the Cavs also have just been so good offensively this year. How much of that is him? I think a lot of it. But he's someone who's never really had a good playoffs either. Yeah, okay. I think to answer my own question of like someone who would make me feel stupid, Wembanyama, I think could certainly be there.
Zion Williamson, have we thrown in the towel on that one, or?
I think so. He's another guy I did a breakdown on recently before this horrible back contusion that shut him down for such a shame.
These poor Pelicans.
That happened,
the same day that CJ McCollum also got a season-ending contusion.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, CJ McCollum, and Zion Williamson are all just like hanging out in Cabo right now, just laughing about how they're getting paid $40 million a year right now. So I would say though, another guy we should probably talk about is Chet Holmgren. I think.
Yes. Oh, like Chet can make it. Chet and J-Dub were the two guys I wrote down like on my futures list. Like, yeah, they could make us look stupid a year from now, even 2 months from now, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, J-Dub he's been in my All-NBA conversation all year. And Chet too. Like, I don't put too much of these injury concerns on him.
Yes.
If he suffers one more, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's had like 2 acute injuries, but then he's been very healthy other than that in his career, even going back.
Yeah, I mean, him getting knocked over and breaking his ass was a little concerning. I mean, let's that was definitely one of the fears of him being so skinny, and it sort of played out. So
it was an iliac, I forget, it was like iliac crest fracture. Not a broken hip, John. It's like the blade of the hip.
Yeah.
Sam Presti's going to call us if we don't say it accurately. He suffered it right after he was finishing his breakfast. And no, the Thunder aren't even really a good team this year. Wouldn't be a disappointment at all if they don't make it to the finals. But yeah, I mean, like that skill set is just so fantastic. And my only concern really, as far as like moving him up this list, is just that he almost isn't going to have enough chance to show it because everyone else around him is so good too.
Yeah.
That we don't know if he can be like that heliocentric defensive force, as Danny likes to say. Yeah. And J-Dub is in there too. Yeah. I think a few other guys all right. Let me ask this, John. We regrettably know at least some of the dialogue that's happening around us. Is there anyone we should discuss that you think people would be like, hey, why isn't that guy in this discussion? Because I think we should at least address that. Some people who might not.
I'd say the two best players we haven't talked about are Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns.
Towns is pretty simple for me, that he just doesn't do enough offensively if he's your 4, and if he's your 5, that your defense is too bad, and you're not winning a championship with him as your second best player. Just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think
I would say he was their
offensively,
third
he's-
best player in Minnesota last year.
Yeah, I mean, lethal shooter, obviously, especially for his size, can mash guys in the paint. I think the other thing is he's just not quite as good like playing out of when defenses collapse on him. He'll throw crazy passes and stuff, so that subtracts some of his offensive value. And then defensively, yeah, he just doesn't add anything to the table.
And then Booker, you mentioned too.
Yeah, just not quite efficient enough. Just so many tough twos mixed in. I mean, he showed like in the Olympics, especially like he showed like he's a really good player. But you still want to see him shoot more threes and rely less on the middies. And he's like a good creator, but he's not elite. He's like good but not elite at a lot of different things. That makes him a very valuable player, but tough to have him as the best player on an elite team.
Well, and just does not shooting well enough from three. Again, there's so many of these years. He's not getting to the rim nearly as much as he did in the past, not having his best defensive year. He's at least gotten past some of the durability concerns. But yeah, I mean, Phoenix, like, I'm sorry, like his argument used to be that they were a 120 offensive rating when he was on the floor, and they're 116 this year, and he plays next to Kevin Durant and a bunch of shooters who can't play defense. So it's, yeah, he just like, I think he could get back to that level. Also didn't have a good playoffs last year. Danny, who's on that list for you of guys who people might think, yeah, they should be in this conversation, and why aren't they to you?
Well, so I mean, I'm glad that Townsend Booker came up because they're guys that score a lot and everything else like that. Bam Adebayo, he to me, I mean, a guy that you and I have liked a lot over the years. To me, he's taken a little bit of a step back defensively and taken potentially a big step back offensively. So he's not quite at that level. There's another group of wings, like we brought up Jimmy Butler, J-Dub, Jaylen Brown potentially is in that group as well. But yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it to me. I mean, I'm sure there'd be some who'd say Domantas Sabonis, but I'm not going to.
I think Nate was about to bring him up.
No, I've we discussed it pretty amply in the center rankings when I had him 16th. But I mean, look, I mean, John, he's made All NBA the last 2 years or something, like 2 of the last 3 years,
and he got a Defensive Player of the Year vote last year.
Wow, that's still amazing.
But so, like, where would you have Sabonis? I mean, you could obviously be pretty general about it if you didn't go and rank that far. But like, why is he not even worthy of discussion in the type of range we're talking about here?
I think he's he's an all-star team candidate, right? Which would put him in the 20 to 30 range, right?
Yeah. Okay. That seems.
Does that sum it up? Like, I mean,
he's a great center to start when your team loses to the Wizards. Sorry, it was unfair, but it happened.
Yeah,
hey,
that
at least he didn't lose. Our number one player lost twice to the Wizards, so we're going to need a different argument, I think.
Well, he did have 54 in the game though, instead of shooting 7 of 16 against Tristan Vukcevic. All right, yeah, I think was there anyone that you found like really difficult to rank?
Wembanyama.
Yeah.
KD for me, just because it's like what he can be versus what he's been is a little bit weird.
Donovan Mitchell was hard for me too, because again, I mean, with these Cleveland guys in general, you're asking yourself, how much is what's around them? I mean, it's just I mean, they have a hell of a team this year. And how much are they kind of buoyed by that versus how much are they doing the buoying, I think is a difficult thing to parse out.
Well, and especially with their lack of success as a team together, like it's different than OKC where it's like they're young, they're just coming together. It's like Cleveland, they just, we'll learn a lot over the next 4 months, much less the next 12.
Mm-hmm.
A few risers and fallers I wanted to talk about here. The name didn't come up, but I had Paul George 17th last year. Not in the discussion. Yeah, that's probably no good. Brunson was a big riser for me after the playoffs that he had, and another great regular season. I had him in the high teens last year. Kawhi we thought he was going to play the playoffs. I had him at number 6 last year.
Item 4.
Yeah. Tyrese is a little faller for me. I had him at 12th last year. Damian Lillard didn't come up at all. I had him 13th last year, and I think he just physically can't bring the level of just like every play get into the basket. He's got like 10 nitro boosts per game, and then I think his defense is really worse than other. He also has to take some of the blame for the Bucks offense being relatively middling this year.
I mean,
like still an all-star, but not an all-NBA player.
I mean, one of my big risers, we talked about it a lot last year, was I had skepticism about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't have that anymore. He went from number 7 to number 2 and could be number 1 next year. Absolutely.
John, anyone for you who's fallen down?
We did not mention the name Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. I mean, I would have had him healthy. If he just hadn't gotten hurt, he would have been solidly in the teens for me.
Yeah.
And I think he would be now still in the next group. Like, I think he'll come back and still be an all-star level player. So he definitely rose for me. I had him 20th last year, so he would have risen to me over the last year, which is pretty incredible for him given his age. Devin Booker was a big faller. I had him 9th last year. That was the Phoenix offense actually was awesome last year when he was on the floor. KD went from 7 down to probably 13 or so for me. I'm going to finalize my rankings and we'll put those out, of course. And Rudy Gobert I had as a solid all-star level player. That wasn't the case this year. Victor obviously is a huge riser. I had him 33rd a year ago. And Joel Embiid, obviously, sadly, had him 5th last year. That's a bummer. All right, well, this was fun. I think we can wrap it here. Not as controversial, maybe, as it's been in the past. Oh, obviously, Evan Mobley was a massive riser.
Yes.
He was not even an all-star last year. That's a huge one. Jaren, another one, is really risen. Steph Curry actually went from 10th to 6th for me between age 36 and 37. That's unbelievable.
Yep.
LeBron went up for me too. Both those guys did.
Yeah. Again, that part of that is just some of these dudes have fallen. Like Joel's fall, Kawhi's fall, KD. Those are the 3 guys. I had them 5 through 7 last year. Oh, Tatum went up for me. He was 8 last year. Now he's 4. Okay. Probably enough here, and I want to remind everyone to subscribe to our free newsletter, which you can do in the public podcast. The links to that are in the show notes. You can get Dan Feldman's writing a couple times a week, and if you want to hear us break down literally every single playoff game, every award, all defense, most improved, no defense team, or worst team all defense is what we call it. We're going to do that over the next week. And then, of course, we'll scout all the key prospects in the draft. Just subscribe to Dunc'd on Prime. Link to that is in the show notes as well. Thanks so much for listening.